The Great Hall of the Valanthi Imperial Palace was the most beautiful place in 12 star systems. Massive pillars of black crystal rose toward a ceiling painted with stars. Golden light floated in the air like living fire. 10,000 nobles stood in perfect silence, their silver skin shining under the glow. Princess Kalith Sorvon walked slowly toward the throne. Her 4 hearts were beating fast, but her face showed nothing. She was the 3rd daughter of Emperor Vorath, the Eternal. She had been trained since birth to hide her emotions. Today, she would need every bit of that training. Today was her wedding day, but this was not the wedding she had dreamed of as a child. She was not marrying a powerful Valanthi lord or a decorated war hero. She was marrying a human. Kalith climbed the steps to stand beside her father's throne. The emperor sat rigid and proud, but she could see the pain in his ancient eyes. He did not want this either. No one wanted this. But they had no choice. The Valanthi Empire was dying. For 300 years, they had fought the Devourer swarm. These horrible creatures were like insects, but each one was the size of a transport ship. They did not negotiate. They did not stop. They only consumed. World after world had fallen to their hunger. Billions of Valanthi had been eaten alive. Now the swarm was coming for the homeworld. The Emperor had sent requests for help to every known civilization. Most had refused. They were too afraid of the swarm. But one species had answered. The humans. Kalith had learned about humans in her studies. They were a young species from a small planet called Earth. They lived for less than 100 years. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no armor, no venom. They could not survive in extreme cold or heat. They needed to eat and drink constantly, or they would die within days. They were, by all measurements, one of the weakest species in the galaxy. But they had ships, they had soldiers, and they were willing to fight. Their price was unusual. They did not want territory or resources. They wanted a marriage alliance, a union between their species and the Valanthi royal family. The Emperor had agreed. He had no other option. Now, Kalith watched as the massive doors at the far end of the hall slowly opened. Her future husband had arrived. Commander Elias Vance walked into the hall alone. He wore a simple, dark uniform, with no decorations except a small flag on his shoulder. His hair was brown and cut short. His skin was an odd pinkish tone. He was shorter than every Valanthi in the room. He looked so... Kalith felt her hope die. She had prayed that maybe, somehow, the human would be impressive, that there would be something about him that would make this sacrifice feel worthy. But he was just a small, soft creature walking through a hall of giants. The nobles watched him with barely hidden disgust. Some whispered behind their hands. A few laughed quietly. Elias did not react. He walked forward with steady steps, his eyes fixed on the throne. His face was calm, not nervous, not angry, just peaceful. He stopped at the base of the stairs and bowed deeply to the Emperor. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice was clear and respectful. "I am honored to stand before you. The Terran Confederacy thanks you for this alliance. We will fight beside you against the swarm." The Emperor nodded stiffly. "The Valanthi Empire accepts your aid, Commander. May this union bring victory to us both." He gestured for Kalith to descend. She walked down the stairs slowly. Each step felt like walking toward a prison. When she reached the bottom, she stood before Elias and looked down at him. She was almost 2 heads taller. Their eyes met. Kalith had expected to see many things in those human eyes. Fear, perhaps, or greed, or lust. She had heard that humans were driven by base desires, but she saw none of that. His eyes were dark brown, warm like wood. They held no threat, no demand. There was only quiet observation. And something else. Something that almost looked like understanding. "Princess Calith," he said softly. "I know. This is not what you wanted. I am sorry that duty has brought us here." She did not know how to respond. No one had acknowledged her feelings. Everyone had simply expected her to obey. "Duty is duty," she said coldly. "Let us complete this ceremony." The wedding was short and formal. They exchanged vows that meant nothing to either of them. A priest blessed their union with ancient words. The nobles applauded without enthusiasm. When it was over, Calith led her new husband to her chambers. She walked fast, forcing him to hurry to keep up. She did not look at him. Inside her rooms, she finally turned to face him. She expected him to approach her, to make demands. She had prepared herself for this moment. But Elias simply stood by the door and looked around the room with polite interest. "Your home is beautiful," he said. "This is your home now as well," she replied stiffly. He nodded. Then he pointed to a small couch near the window. "Would it be acceptable if I slept there tonight? You do not know me. I do not wish to make you uncomfortable." Calith stared at him. You do not wish to. I wish to earn your trust," Elias said simply. "That takes time. There is no rush." She did not know what to say. She watched as he removed his jacket, folded it neatly, and lay down on the small couch. It was far too short for him. His feet hung over the edge. "Good night, princess," he said. "I hope tomorrow is easier than today." Within minutes, he was asleep. Calith stood in the middle of her room for a long time, staring at this strange human. Nothing about him made sense. He had power in this situation, but he did not use it. He had rights as her husband, but he did not claim them. What kind of creature was he? She went to her bed but could not sleep. She lay awake, listening to his quiet breathing, wondering what she had married. 3 days passed. Elias asked for nothing. He ate whatever food was offered without complaint. He spent his days studying Valanthi battle records and meeting with military commanders. He treated everyone with the same calm respect, whether they were admirals or servants. Each night, he slept on the small couch. Each night, Calith watched him and wondered. On the third night, she finally spoke to him. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" she asked. "You could have demanded resources. Ships, technology. Why ask for a wife who does not want you?" Elias was quiet for a moment. Because alliances built on things can break when the things run out. Alliances built on family last longer. "I am not your family." "Not yet," he agreed. "But maybe someday." She laughed bitterly. "You are optimistic for a man who will die of old age before I reach middle years." "Perhaps," he said, "but I have learned that short lives can still have great meaning." Before she could respond, alarms started screaming throughout the palace. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted in the corridors. Calith's blood went cold. The swarm was here. She turned to tell Elias they needed to reach the shelter, but she stopped. He was already standing. He had changed into strange armor that fit his body like a second skin. It was dark gray, with glowing blue lines running through it. But that was not what made her freeze. His eyes had changed. The warm brown was gone. In its place was something cold, something ancient, something that looked like it had seen 1,000 battles and was hungry for one more. "Stay here, princess," he said. His voice was different too, harder, sharper. "Where are you going?" she demanded. He walked toward the door. "I need to go to work." He was gone before she could stop him. Calith stood alone, her heart's pounding. She thought about obeying his command. She thought about staying safe. Then she grabbed her weapon and ran after him. She needed to see what her husband truly was. Calith ran through the palace corridors. Red emergency lights flashed everywhere. Servants and nobles rushed past her toward the underground shelters. Guards shouted orders. Children cried. But Kalith moved in the opposite direction. She was running toward the command center. She was running toward her husband. The command center was located in the highest tower of the palace. It was a massive circular room filled with holographic displays and military officers. From here, the Emperor commanded all Valanthi forces across the system. When Kalith burst through the doors, she found chaos. Admirals were shouting at each other. Tactical officers were frantically working at their stations. The main display showed the space above their planet. And what Kalith saw made her legs weak. Ships. Hundreds of ships. The Devourer swarm had sent over 300 bioships to attack their world. Each ship was a living creature, grown from organic matter, armed with acid weapons, and carrying millions of swarm soldiers. This was not a raid. This was an extinction force. The Emperor stood before the main display, his face gray with despair. Around him, his admirals argued about defensive positions and evacuation routes. No one had any real answers. Then Kalith saw Elias. He stood at the edge of the room, watching the tactical display with those cold, calculating eyes. His arms were crossed. His face showed no fear. Admiral Torvan, the highest military commander in the Empire, noticed him. The admiral's silver face twisted with anger. "Why is this human here?" Torvan demanded. "This is a military command center. He has no authority." "He is my daughter's husband," the Emperor said tiredly. "He has the right to be present." "Present? Yes. But he should remain silent and let true warriors handle this." Elias said nothing. He just continued watching the display. The admirals returned to their argument. Some wanted to concentrate the fleet at the orbital stations. Others wanted to spread out and create multiple defensive lines. A few suggested immediate evacuation of the royal family. Nothing they suggested would work. Kalith could see it clearly. Their fleet had only 80 ships remaining. Against 300 swarm vessels, they would be crushed in hours. "We should send a message to the other systems," one admiral said. "Request immediate reinforcement." "There is no time," another replied. "The nearest Allied fleet is 4 days away. The swarm will reach orbit in 6 hours. Then we die with honor. We stand and fight. And lose everything? We should evacuate, save what we can." The arguing continued. Minutes passed. Precious minutes. Then Elias moved. He walked forward, past the admirals, past the Emperor, until he stood directly in front of the main display. He raised his hand and touched the holographic controls. "What are you doing?" Admiral Torvan grabbed his shoulder. "Step away, human. You have no right. Remove your hand." Elias did not look at him. His voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. "Now." Something in his tone made the admiral freeze. Torvan was a warrior who had fought for 200 years. He had faced swarm monsters in close combat. But something about this small human made him release his grip and step back. Elias began manipulating the display. He moved ship icons, drew lines, created formations that no Valanthi had ever seen. "Your fleet doctrine is wrong," Elias said, his voice carried across the silent room. "You fight defensively. You establish perimeters and hold positions. You wait for the enemy to come to you." Ardor. He turned to face the admirals. His eyes swept across them like a general inspecting failed soldiers. "That is why you are losing." Admiral Torvan's face darkened with rage. "You dare lecture us. We have fought the swarm for 300 years. What do humans know of war?" Elias smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Humans have been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. We fought each other across every piece of land on our planet. We killed each other with stones, with metal, with chemicals, with atoms. We developed 10,000 ways to destroy ourselves. He stepped closer to the admiral. Despite being shorter, somehow he seemed to look down at the Valanthi warrior. The swarm is dangerous because it only knows hunger. You have been trying to stop a flood by building walls. We are going to teach them something new. What? The Emperor asked. Elias turned to face him. Fear. The human fleet arrived 30 minutes later. Calith watched the display as 40 Terran warships emerged from hyperspace. They were smaller than Valanthi vessels, with angular shapes and dark hulls. They looked like predators, sleek and deadly. 40 ships. Against 300. This is your reinforcement? Admiral Torvan laughed bitterly. We are saved. Elias ignored him. He connected to the human fleet's communication system and began issuing orders. His voice was calm and precise. Arrow formation. Target the central mass. Do not engage the flanks until my signal. The human ships moved. They did not spread out into defensive positions. They did not form protective lines around the planet. Instead, they arranged themselves into a sharp wedge and accelerated directly toward the swarm fleet. They are attacking? Calith whispered. That is madness. Watch, Elias said. The two fleets met. What happened next would change everything Calith believed about warfare. The human ships did not fight like Valanthi vessels. They did not hold positions or exchange fire from safe distances. They moved constantly, spinning and diving through the swarm formation like living creatures. They used speed and angles that should have been impossible, and they did not fight alone. Elias stood at the center of the command room, his eyes closed, his hands moving through holographic controls. He was connected to something, some system that let him see through every human ship at once. He commanded them not as separate vessels, but as parts of one great beast. Squadron 3. Dive. Squadron 7. Prepare torpedoes. Squadron 1. Draw them toward the asteroid field. The swarm ships tried to surround the humans, but every time they closed a trap, the humans were already gone. Every time they concentrated fire on one vessel, two others struck from behind. Calith watched a swarm bioship, a massive creature that had destroyed entire Valanthi squadrons, get torn apart by 4 human frigates, working in perfect coordination. They hit it from 4 directions at the same moment, targeting the same weak point. How are they doing this? Admiral Torvan breathed. His anger was gone. Only shock remained. Humans learned long ago, Elias said, his eyes still closed. The strong eat the weak. So we learned to never be weak. We learned to fight as one. The battle continued. Human ships took damage. Some were destroyed. But for every human vessel lost, 10 swarm ships died. After 2 hours, the impossible happened. The swarm fleet turned and fled. The command center erupted in cheers. Officers embraced each other. Even the stern admirals showed relief on their faces. But Calith did not celebrate. She watched her husband. Elias had opened his eyes. He looked exhausted. Blood was dripping from his nose. Whatever connection he had used to command the fleet had cost him something. He wiped the blood away and checked the display. His expression was not victorious. It was thoughtful. Planning. Calith approached him. You did it. You drove them back. For now, Elias said. This was just a test. They wanted to see what we could do. A test? They sent 300 ships. And now they know we can hurt them. Elias looked at her. Those cold warrior eyes were fading, replaced by the warm brown she had first seen. Next time, they will send 3,000. And they will bring the hive queens. Calith felt cold. The queens? They never leave their home systems. They will for us. Elias smiled tiredly. We scared them today. Scared creatures are dangerous. But we have time now. A few weeks, maybe a month. He swayed on his feet. Kalith caught his arm without thinking. "You need rest," she said. "Soon." He patted her hand gently. "First, I need to send a message to my people. They need to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Elias looked at the display, at the retreating swarm ships, at the stars beyond. The real war. He walked toward the communication station, leaving Kalith standing alone with a terrible realization. Today had not been a victory. Today had been an invitation. Her husband had just told the swarm exactly where to find humanity, and he had done it on purpose. 3 weeks passed after the first battle. The Valanthi people celebrated their survival. Songs were sung about the brave human allies who had come to save them. The Emperor declared a week of festivals. For the first time in years, there was hope. But Kalith did not celebrate. She spent her days watching her husband, studying him, trying to understand what kind of creature she had married. Elias worked constantly. He met with Valanthi engineers to upgrade their ships. He trained their pilots in human combat tactics. He reviewed intelligence reports about the swarm. He slept only 4 or 5 hours each night. And every night, he still slept on the small couch. Kalith began to notice small things about him. The way he always thanked servants for their work. The way he remembered everyone's name, from admirals to cleaning staff. The way he never raised his voice, even when officers made mistakes. She also noticed darker things. Sometimes, late at night, she would wake to find him standing at the window. He would stare at the stars for hours, his face empty, his eyes seeing something far away. Once, she heard him whisper names in his sleep. Dozens of names, spoken with grief. One evening, she found him in the palace training room. He was fighting against a combat simulator, a holographic system that created enemy soldiers to battle. The difficulty was set to maximum. Kalith watched from the doorway. Elias moved through the holographic enemies like water through stones. His fighting style was nothing like Valanthi combat. There was no honor in it, no formal techniques. He struck at weak points. He used dirty tricks. He fought like a creature that expected to die and wanted to take everything with him. When the simulation ended, he stood among the fading holograms, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. "You fight like you hate them," Kalith said. Elias turned. He did not seem surprised to see her. "That is not Valanthi way. We fight with honor, with dignity. Honor is for those who can afford it." Elias wiped sweat from his face. Humans learned long ago that dead heroes win no wars. Kalith walked into the training room. She had been wanting to ask him something for weeks. Tonight, she finally had the courage. "The Emperor asked you about human weapons," she said. "Secret technologies. You refused to answer. Why?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down on a training bench and looked at her with tired eyes. "Do you want to know what makes humans dangerous?" he asked. "Yes. It is not our weapons. It is not our ships. It is not our tactics." He leaned forward. "It is that we are afraid." Kalith frowned. "Afraid? Fear is weakness." "No. Fear is power." Elias stood and walked toward her. "Your people are born strong. You have natural armor, sharp claws. You live for 500 years. You have never truly faced extinction." He stopped in front of her. Despite being smaller, his presence filled the room. "Humans are born soft, weak. We have no claws, no armor. We die from cold, from heat, from hunger, from thirst. 100 things can kill us before we even learn to walk." His voice grew intense. "We are afraid from the moment we are born. And that fear taught us something." "What?" "That the universe wants us dead. And we refuse to let it win." Later that night, Kalith could not sleep. She kept thinking about Elias's words, about fear, about survival. She got out of bed, and walked through the palace. She did not know where she was going until she arrived at the memorial garden. This was a sacred place. Holographic monuments displayed the names of every Valanthi who had died fighting the swarm. Millions of names, glowing softly in the darkness. She was not alone. Elias stood before a small holographic display he had added to the garden. It showed human names, thousands of them. Kalith approached quietly and stood beside him. "Who were they?" she asked. Elias did not look away from the names. "My first command. I was 26 years old. I was given a ship with 600 crew members." He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy. "We were ambushed by pirates. I made a decision. I ordered an attack instead of retreat. I thought I could win." He touched one of the glowing names. 557 died because of my choice. Kalith felt something twist in her chest. "That is a heavy burden." "It is." Elias finally looked at her. His eyes were wet with tears, but his voice remained steady. "I wanted to die after that. I felt I deserved to die, but I did not have that right. I won by." "What do you mean?" "Those people followed my orders. They trusted me. If I died, their deaths would mean nothing." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "So I lived. I learned. I studied every mistake I made. I trained until I was better. I swore I would never let it happen again." He turned to face her fully. "That is what humans do, Princess. We break. We fall. We lose everything. And then we stand up and keep fighting. Not because we are brave, because we are too stubborn to stay down." Kalith looked at this small, fragile creature. This being who carried the weight of 500 deaths on his shoulders, who still woke every morning and fought for people who were not even his own species. She had thought humans were weak. She was beginning to understand that she had been wrong. "You are strange creatures," she said softly. "Yes," Elias smiled. It was a sad smile. "But we are your strange creatures now." The warning came at dawn. Kalith was asleep when alarms filled the palace. She jumped from bed and ran to the command center, her heart's pounding. The main display showed something that made every officer in the room go silent. The swarm had returned, but not with 300 ships. 3,000 swarm bioships filled the space around the planet. They blocked out the stars like a living cloud, and at the center of the formation, 3 massive vessels pulsed with dark energy. "What are those?" Kalith whispered. Admiral Torvan answered, his voice hollow with despair. "Hive. Queens. 3 of them." Kalith had heard stories about the Hive Queens. They were the rulers of the swarm. Each one was a ship the size of a small moon, containing an intelligence that controlled millions of swarm soldiers. They never left their home systems. Until now. "We cannot fight this," Torvan said. "We must evacuate. Save the royal family. Preserve what we can." Other officers nodded. Plans were made. Ships were prepared. The Emperor stood before the display, his ancient face showing defeat. 300 years, he said quietly. 300 years of fighting, and it ends like this. Then a voice cut through the despair. "No." Everyone turned. Elias stood at the entrance of the command center. He was wearing his strange armor again. "There will be no evacuation," he said. "There will be no retreat." Admiral Torvan stepped forward angrily. "You have no authority here, human. This is not your decision." "You are correct." Elias walked past him toward the main display. "It is not my decision. It is my duty." He touched the controls. New ships appeared on the display. Human ships, 150 of them, emerging from hyperspace behind the swarm fleet. "The Terran Second Fleet has arrived," Elias said. and I will be taking command personally." The Emperor frowned. "Taking command? How?" Elias turned to face the room. His eyes had changed again. That cold, ancient thing was looking out from behind them. "There is something I have not told you about humans," he said, "about what we become when we stop being afraid of death." He smiled. It was not a human smile. "Let me show you." The command center was silent. Every officer stared at Elias. The Emperor had risen from his throne. Even Admiral Torvin had stopped arguing. Kalith watched her husband walk toward the center of the room. There was something different about him now. He moved with a purpose that made the air feel heavy. "What do you mean?" the Emperor asked. "What will you show us?" Elias stopped and looked at the old ruler. "Your Majesty, I was not sent here just as a diplomat. I was sent because of what I am. And what are you?" "A weapon." He turned to Kalith. His cold eyes softened for just a moment. "Come with me. There is something you need to see. Something I should have shown you before." Kalith looked at her father. The Emperor nodded slowly. She followed Elias out of the command center. They walked through the palace to a private landing pad. A small human shuttle waited there. Elias led her inside, and they flew toward his flagship, the TSS Prometheus. The ship was different from Valanthi vessels. It was dark, gray, covered in angles and sharp edges. It looked like a predator sleeping in the void. Inside, Elias led her through narrow corridors. Human crew members saluted as they passed. Everyone looked at their commander with something Kalith recognized. It was not just respect. It was faith. They reached a door marked with strange symbols. Elias pressed his hand against a scanner. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a small room. The walls were covered with glowing screens and strange machinery. In the center sat a chair, surrounded by cables and lights. It looked almost like a throne, but also like a prison. "What is this?" Kalith asked. Elias walked to the chair and touched it gently. "This is called Prometheus. It is humanity's greatest achievement, and our greatest curse." 10. He turned to face her. "Do you remember what I told you about human fear? About how we learn to survive?" "How?" "Yes. What I did not tell you is that we also learned something else. Something about our own minds." He sat down in the chair. "When a human faces certain death, when we truly accept that we are going to die, something changes in our brain. We become faster, stronger. Our senses sharpen. Time seems to slow down." Kalith frowned. "Battle focus. Many species have this." "Not like this." Elias shook his head. "Human scientists studied this effect for centuries. They found that in those moments, our consciousness expands. We can process information thousands of times faster than normal. Our instincts become perfect." He touched the cables around the chair. "Prometheus is a machine that forces this state. It connects a human mind directly to every ship in a fleet, every weapon, every sensor, every soldier." Kalith felt cold. "Yes. For a short time, I stop being one man. I become a distributed intelligence across hundreds of vessels. I can see every angle of a battle at once. I can react in microseconds. I can coordinate attacks that would be impossible for any normal commander." It sounded incredible. It sounded like the power of a god. "But there is a cost," Kalith said. It was not a question. Elias smiled sadly. "Of course there is a cost. There is always a cost." He rolled up his sleeve. Kalith gasped. His arm was covered in thin scars, like cracks in glass. They glowed faintly with a pale blue light, the same color as the lines on his armor. "Prometheus burns the brain," Elias said. "Every time I use it, I lose something. Memories, motor functions, years of my life. He covered his arm again. Most Prometheus users survive 3 or 4 uses. Then, their minds collapse. Calith's heart went cold. How many times have you used it? Twice. Elias looked at her with steady eyes. Today will be my 3rd. No, the word came out before she could stop it. You cannot. You will die. Maybe. Maybe not. Elias stood from the chair. But if I do not use it, your people will certainly die. The swarm will consume this world, and then move to the next. Billions will be eaten. He stepped closer to her. I told you once that short lives can have great meaning. This is what I meant. I was always going to die young. Every human does, compared to your people. But I can choose what my death means. Calith felt something breaking inside her. 3 weeks ago, she had hated this man. She had seen him as a burden, a mark of shame. Now she understood that he was going to sacrifice himself for her people. People who had looked down on him, mocked him, dismissed him. Why? She asked. Her voice cracked. We are not your people. We treated you with disrespect. Why would you die for us? Elias reached out and touched her face. His hand was warm against her silver skin. Because you are my people now, he said. That is what the marriage meant. Not politics, not alliance. Family. He smiled. I protect my family. They returned to the command center. The situation had grown worse. The swarm fleet was advancing. The 3 hive queens were moving toward the planet, surrounded by thousands of bioships. The Emperor looked at Elias. You said you would show us something. Show us now. Elias nodded. He connected his armor to the command center's systems. Every screen in the room flickered. What I am about to do will look strange, Elias said. Do not be afraid, and do not interfere. He closed his eyes. The blue lines on his armor began to glow brighter. The light spread up his neck, across his face. When he opened his eyes again, they were completely blue, like stars burning in his skull. His voice came from everywhere at once. Prometheus link established. On the tactical display, the human fleet began to move. But not like normal ships. They moved together, perfectly synchronized, like the fingers of a single hand. 152 vessels connected. Elias raised his hands. On the display, the human fleet raised its weapons. 43,000 crew members linked. His voice grew deeper. It echoed with strange harmonics. I am the fleet. The fleet is me. We are one mind. One purpose. He turned his burning eyes toward the swarm armada. One fury. The human fleet attacked. Calith had seen battles before. She had watched recordings of great wars from Valanthi history. She thought she understood combat. She was wrong. The human ships did not fight like separate vessels. They fought like a single organism with 152 bodies. They anticipated each other's movements. They covered each other's weaknesses. They struck from angles that seemed impossible. Swarm bioships died by the dozens. Human vessels danced through enemy fire, always moving, never stopping. When one ship took damage, others immediately adjusted to protect it, and at the center of it all stood Elias. His body was rigid. Blue light poured from his eyes, his mouth, his ears. His hands moved constantly, conducting a symphony of destruction. Blood began to drip from his nose, then from his ears. He is dying, Calith whispered. He knows, Admiral Torvan said quietly. The old warrior's voice held something new. Respect. He knows, and he fights anyway. On the display, the first hive queen took a direct hit from coordinated fire. The massive creature screamed a sound that echoed through space itself and exploded. The command center erupted in cheers. But Calith did not cheer. She watched her husband burn himself alive to save her people, and she finally understood what humans truly were. The battle lasted 11 hours. Kalith stood in the command center the entire time. She did not eat. She did not sit. She watched the tactical display, and she watched her husband. Elias had become something beyond human. His consciousness stretched across 152 ships. He saw through thousands of sensors. He controlled millions of weapons. He was everywhere at once, and he was destroying the swarm. Human ships moved like ghosts through the enemy fleet. They struck and vanished. They appeared behind swarm vessels and tore them apart. They used asteroids as weapons, pushing them into enemy formations. They sacrificed damaged ships as explosive traps. The swarm had never faced anything like this. The first Hive Queen had died in the opening hour. The massive creature had tried to coordinate her forces, but Elias was faster. He had found the weak point in her defenses and sent 17 frigates on a suicide run directly into her core. The explosion had been visible from the planet's surface. The second Hive Queen lasted longer. She was smarter, more careful. She surrounded herself with thousands of bioships. She thought she was safe. Elias used the planet's gravity to slingshot 40 ships around the moon. They came from an angle the Queen never expected. The combined firepower of the Volanthi orbital platforms Elias had secretly repositioned days before burned her from existence. Now only one Hive Queen remained, and she was afraid. Kalith watched the last queen on the tactical display. The massive creature had stopped advancing. Her remaining ships had formed a defensive sphere around her. "She is retreating," Admiral Torvand said. There was wonder in his voice. "The swarm is retreating." It was true. For the first time in 300 years, the devourer swarm was running away. But victory had a price. Kalith looked at Elias. His body was shaking violently. Blood poured from his nose, his ears, his eyes. The blue light was flickering. His skin had turned gray. "He cannot continue," the Emperor said quietly. "The human is dying." "He knows," Kalith whispered. "He has always known." On the display, the swarm fleet was accelerating away from the planet. The last Hive Queen was fleeing. In minutes, they would be gone. Then Elias spoke. His voice came from every speaker in the command center. It echoed with the power of 150 ships. No, the human fleet changed direction. Instead of letting the swarm escape, they pursued. "What is he doing?" Torvand demanded. "He has won. Why is he chasing them?" Kalith understood. She felt it in her hearts. "Because fear fades," she said. "If the Queen escapes, she will return in 10 years with a larger fleet. He wants to end this forever." By killing himself? Kalith did not answer. She watched the display as the human fleet caught up to the retreating swarm. The last queen tried to fight back, but her forces were broken. Her ships were scattered and demoralized. Elias showed no mercy. His fleet surrounded the queen like predators around wounded prey. They cut off her escape routes. They destroyed her guards. They pushed her toward the system's sun. The final attack was beautiful and terrible. Elias coordinated every remaining ship into a single formation. They moved as one being, one mind, one purpose. They struck the Hive Queen from every direction at the exact same moment. The creature that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000,000 years died screaming. Then the blue light in Elias's eyes went dark. He collapsed. Kalith reached him first. She caught his body before it hit the ground. He was so light, so fragile. Blood covered his face. His skin was cold. "Elias." She held him in her arms. "Elias, please." His eyes opened slowly. The blue glow was gone. They were brown again, warm, and tired, and human. "Did we win?" he whispered. "Yes." Tears fell from Kalith's eyes. She had not cried since she was a child. "You won. You saved everyone. You You. He smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. Good. His voice was barely audible. Good duty. Good. 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 His eyes closed. No, Kaleth screamed. Someone help him, please. Human medics rushed into the command center. They surrounded Elias, working frantically. They injected medicines. They used strange machines. They fought against death with the same stubborn fury their commander had shown in battle. Kaleth was pushed aside. She stood watching, helpless, as the humans tried to save their fallen god. The Emperor appeared beside her. He put a hand on her shoulder. I am sorry, daughter, he said. I did not understand what I was asking you to accept. He is not dead, Kaleth said fiercely. He cannot be dead. He promised he would stay. But even as she spoke, she saw the medics slowing down. She saw their faces falling. She saw hope leaving their eyes. Then one medic shouted something. We have a pulse. He is alive. 6 months later, the great hall of the Valanthi Imperial Palace was filled again. But this time, it was not filled with Valanthi alone. Representatives from 12 different species stood together. The Galactic Coalition, a new alliance formed from the ashes of the Swarm War, had gathered for its first official meeting. Princess Kaleth Sorvin stood before them. She was no longer just a princess. Her father had named her Voice of the Throne, the highest diplomatic position in the Empire. Behind her, in a floating medical chair, sat Elias Vance. The war had taken almost everything from him. He would never walk again. His memories were damaged. Some days he forgot simple things. His lifespan had been cut short by decades. But he was alive. And he was hers. The humans have a saying. Kaleth addressed the council. They claim they are not the strongest or the fastest. They say their only gift is stubbornness, the refusal to accept that the universe wants them dead. She turned to look at her husband. He smiled at her. It was a crooked smile now, damaged by what he had sacrificed. But it was still the smile she had learned to love. I married this man out of duty, Kaleth continued. I did not want him. I did not respect him. I saw him as weak. She walked to his chair and took his hand. His grip was weak, but it was warm. I was wrong. She faced the council again. I have witnessed what humans truly are. They are not conquerors. They are not destroyers. They are protectors. They will sacrifice everything, their bodies, their minds, their lives, for those they call family. She lifted Elias's hand. This man called my people his family. He burned his own soul to save us. He became a god so that we could survive. The council was silent. Every eye was on the broken human in the floating chair. The Terran Confederacy asks to join the Galactic Coalition as full members. Kaleth said, I ask that you accept them, not because they are powerful, but because they are good. The vote was unanimous. That night, Kaleth sat beside Elias in their chambers. He was tired. He was always tired now, but his eyes were clear. You did not have to say those things, he said quietly. I said only the truth. Still. He squeezed her hand. Thank you. Kaleth leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. It was a Valanthi gesture of deep love. Thank you, she whispered. For showing me what humans are. For showing me what love is. Elias smiled. I thought you married me out of duty. I did. She kissed him gently. Now, I stay, because I choose to. Outside their window, the stars shone peacefully. The swarm was gone. The galaxy was healing. And somewhere in the darkness, other civilizations whispered a new word to each other. A warning. A legend. They spoke of the small, soft creatures from a tiny planet called Earth. They spoke of the species that had broken the unbreakable swarm. They spoke of humans. And they learned to respect them. The end.